Hey, 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 it is time for another episode of Laurel Ann's Gaia Logues. And today I decided to focus on this upcoming holiday that we have here in the United States, in the country formerly known as the United States of America, but also in Canada as well. The holiday formerly known as Columbus Day, in some places currently known as Indigenous Peoples Day. I'm just going to call it like it is, and I'm just going to call it Colonizers Day, because this is an opportunity, and a rather urgent and necessary opportunity, for the descendants of colonizers to reflect on what that all means and how we want to interact with that reality. So, de-colonizing one's mind is just as important for the descendants of colonizers as it is for those who have been the subjects of colonization. So this whole episode is partly related to the Gaia content, but it's really more related to the holiday and just what I happen to be watching this week and how those are all interacting with each other. And I'm going to also frame that with what my current situation is. So about a year ago, I probably entered what would be a fairly substantial period of cocooning and shadow work and grief work. I didn't realize that's what it was at the time, but that's definitely what was happening. And it also coincided with financially needing to kind of go back to work, right? I think that at first in my mind, I considered that to be somewhat of a failure, but I have since learned that, in fact, I jokingly said for many, many months that I am seeking different opportunities to be of service to the world, because we can be of service to the world in a million different ways. And many of us have had many jobs and worn many hats in our lives, especially if you're theater people. If you're theater people, you know, we always have multiple aspects to a theater production that we have to do, and most of us often also have many jobs that we've had to do. And something that I have come to learn about myself is that for my energetic body to be willing to dedicate the hours of labor that are required for any sort of full-time job, in order for me to be able to do that and feel physically okay about it, because, you know, our bodies know the score, as they say, and our bodies remember things, and our bodies respond physically when we are in situations that are not aligned with what our purpose and objectives are in life. And so, for example, in the last year, when I have been, doing this whole process of getting myself ready for the job market, working jobs, finding jobs, applying for jobs, all that stuff. I don't know if you've been on Indeed lately, but there's jobs all over the place. It's just whether or not we want those jobs, right? So for me, the one that kept coming up that I kept looking at and going, I just don't know if I can do that. There's tons of jobs out there for insurance sales, which to me is so kind of ludicrous and preposterous that the industry that appears to be most profitable right now in this country is an industry that, in my mind, is completely superfluous. The whole insurance industry, in my personal opinion, is a bit of a scam. We should all be caring for each other automatically already. We should already have universal health care already. We shouldn't have to be the so-called part of the so-called first world, so-called civilized, so-called industrialized nations and not be providing basic care. And also when I hear from people from other countries, oh, you Americans are always suing each other, it also makes me wonder why liability insurance has to be so much of a thing. Now, that may be a bit of a rabbit hole that we don't need to get into. But needless to say, I knew I could never work selling insurance because I don't believe in it. I don't believe in it as an industry, and so I can't dedicate my full-time energy to that industry. And also, weirdly, all of the times that I was contacted by a company related to the insurance industry, every single one of those jobs wasn't paying a salary plus commissions or a salary plus bonuses. They were all just paying 100% commissions and bonuses. And they're talking about how people are making tons and tons and tons of money. But the thing is, that to me is an indicator that that industry is 100% purely profit motivated. And for me, that is one of the ways that I am decolonizing my reality, is that I'm choosing consciously which industries and which industries I want to support and which structures I want to inhabit. So for the last 3 or 4 months, I've been in this paid training program where I've been, learning some really handy sales skills. Believe it or not, I never thought I would say that. My father was a salesman, and I was convinced that he was Willy Loman and that, it was all just a downhill capitalist spiral from there. But because the industry that I've been working with is educational technology, there's a part of me that feels like my daily purpose is in helping to make education more efficient and more effective. Because if we aren't focusing on providing the next generation with a decent quality education, we are shortchanging our futures. And so it has been, easier for me to buy into that as an industry. And then all signs are pointing, though there are still some things that, some details that need to happen, but all signs are pointing to the fact that I may be moving into an industry that is linked to telecommunications. And part of my reason for buying into that industry is that we are no longer in the industrial age. We are in the information age. This has been true for a few decades already, because in the industrial age, it was all about how our labor was producing objects, hard goods, things that were physical goods that had value, and it was clear that we were contributing labor to the thing that we could go purchase with the money we were earning from those wages. However, inflation always goes up way faster than wages do. I think that's probably true in every country. I know that it's especially true in Brazil, and it's definitely been true here in the States as well. So now that we are in the information age, to me, the safety and security of our data, of our information, is probably the newest and most important aspect to just being a human in the world, not even necessarily for businesses, but just being a human in the world. The protection and security of our data, of our information, of our ability to safely and effectively exchange information, our ability to effectively communicate with each other. We have already seen how all of that can be weaponized. We have already seen it. We are seeing it. So it is not that much of a stretch for me to say, okay, I have all these talents in life. I have the gift of whatever. I have the gift of this. I have experience doing that, whether it's customer service or sales or research or writing or marketing or this or that or the other. And I know many of us have many skills and many hats. So I feel fairly good about the idea of dedicating my labor for a while, maybe not for the rest of my life, but maybe for a few years at least, dedicating my labor to helping make sure that we have secure, stable, and effective ways to communicate and protect our information and our channels of communication. So all of that to say that I invite all of us to take this weekend where in Canada they're celebrating Canadian Thanksgiving Day, and here in the United States the schools are off so that we can either celebrate Indigenous people or Columbus, depending on whether your school district is still colonized or not. And so I also want to shift gears now, because this is the preface. This is the context. The context is it's Colonizers Day, and we need to look at ourselves. And what I happen to be watching this week are three very, very, very distinctly different programs on, I think, three different channels, three different media outlets. The only thing they have in common is that they're all nonfiction. So the first thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about the show that I've been watching on Gaia this week. And I've been watching this show for a long time. I've seen them go through three different hosts. And the program is called Mystery Teachings. So Mystery Teachings started out with Johnny Enoch, with a name like Johnny Enoch. It's got to be a time-traveling dream oracle's fantasy, right? And you know me, I love me some time-traveling dream oracle. So the first season that I saw was with Johnny Enoch. The second season I saw was with, oh my goodness, I forgot her name. She is a physicist who has been on a lot of the other, Teresa Bullard, thank you. Thank you to the inside of my brain that saw the button. Teresa Bullard was the host of the second season that I watched. I think she might have even hosted 2 or 3 seasons. So Johnny Enoch, his approach to Mystery Teachings was very much about kind of like ancient history and looking through time at how these mystery teachings have been shared and protected through time. Teresa Bullard's focus had a very, very strong connection to the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life, and so her mystery teachings were heavily influenced by that. And now, oh my goodness, and I forgot this woman that is the new host of Mystery Teachings. Shame on me, I should have looked it up before I hit the record button. I'll have to put her name in the description, in the credits. So she has been approaching it from a very modern / postmodern perspective. And I have found her approach interesting and stimulating and curious and also weird, and sometimes I disagree. And that's great, right? Like that we can engage with material and just decide for ourselves whether or not we agree or disagree, at least to be able to entertain these new thoughts. But one of the things that her approach sort of focuses on is the power of our thoughts to shape our reality. And I know we've heard this for a long time, if you've been running in the same circles I'm running in. The power of our thoughts to shape our reality is very linked to this concept of multiverses, as well as the soul's evolutionary journey. And I think if we really start digging, we're going to see that AI has the ability to lead us in one direction or another. If we depend too much on AI, then we become slaves to AI. But if we consciously allow it to support our own soul's evolutionary journey, then it can serve a different purpose. So that's what I've been watching on Gaia, Mystery Teachings. I highly recommend, and don't try to do more than 2 episodes in a row. It's a lot of information to take in. It's very dense, and it also is very, it can be a bit mind-blowing. And so when our mind is going to be blown, my recommendation is to do that in smaller chunks rather than all at once. Although, if you're like me, sometimes you want to just dive all the way in and just blow the mind completely. And if that's your jam, then dedicate this weekend to a binge watch of Mystery Teachings. Now, however, the other 2 things I've been watching, very different. One of them is, it's called Is This Cake or Is It Cake? And it's the Halloween version. So one of my kind of what do you call it? One of my little guilty pleasures in life is I've never been a baker. I do make a damn good chocolate chip cookie with a special secret recipe adaptation that I have. But I've never been into like cakes or the whole like frosting and decoration and things like that. It just never was anything I was particularly good at. It was never my jam, but I love watching other people do these kinds of very creative sculptural uses of food as art. That to me is fun and amazing and fantastic. And of course, Halloween is my favorite holiday. And so when I can see cakes turned into Halloween-themed objects of sculptural creation, artistic ones, then I get very excited. And the host is a guy from Saturday Night Live. I want to say his name is Mikey Day. I hope I didn't screw that up. Again, I'm terrible with names. But he's the one on Saturday Night Live. He's kind of always speaks in funny voices. He's got big ears and he's got a very vibrant facial expressions. So he's hosting this very silly competition show where the whole point of the show is to make a cake that fools the judges. So they have decoys. So every person competing makes their cake, and then it has to be as close a look-alike to, 4 or 5 decoys that they have. And then if you fool the judges and they can't tell that your cake is cake, then you win your prize, your money, or all the stuff. And so even that element right there, that the whole point, the whole purpose is deception. The whole point, the whole purpose is to mislead the audience, the judges, into not being able to see the real truth. How is that for a cake full of metaphor for the time that we're living in this information age? So that's one of the other shows that I've been binge watching this week, since Halloween is coming up, and Halloween is my favorite holiday, and I love me some baking shows. The other one that my partner introduced me to has been very curious. I forget the name of it. I'll have to find out and look it up. It's the whole premise of it. It's basically a reality show, and I'm not normally a fan of reality shows, but this one has a very interesting premise. So they're taking 3 21st century families, 3 families who live today, right now, and they are having them give up all of their 21st century technology to go live in a homestead that would have been exactly the same as it was in the 1880s. And I think they're spending like 2 months there, essentially almost like a survival camp. So these 3 families have gone to the frontier where they are learning how to live off the land. Now, I'm going to pause for a moment and we're going to talk about the Homestead Act very, very briefly. I'm not going to go into detail, but this whole premise that I believe it was Abraham Lincoln that started the idea that somehow the West needed to be settled by the colonizers, right? Like people were already there, but okay, here we are, we're colonizing. So we're settling the West. And several things I find very fascinating about this. One is the concept of ownership of property. Because one of the families that they have invited to participate in this reality show is an African-American family. And so they had a historian come in and they actually looked at their specific family tree and saw that one of their grandparents or great-grandparents or whatever their recent ancestors was someone who was recently emancipated and went westward because they realized, like, I've been farming your land for you, motherfuckers. I'm going to go get a piece of my own land and farm it myself and reap the rewards of it. So to have somebody be able to go from being chattel property to owning property was a massive decolonization of their reality. So even though what we in 21st century standards look at as life on a homestead in the 1880s as a very, very difficult and laborious and hardworking in the field kind of life, for someone who was wanting to literally reap the harvest, the value of their labors, because in the industrial age and in the age when human beings were allowed to be considered slaves, then it was a very different way of looking at how you reap the value of your labor. And it goes back to that same reason I was talking about at the beginning, about how I need to, for myself, I need to consciously choose what industries I'm serving and supporting, and how am I being of service to my local community and to my global community. And that's what came up in this show about these 3 families that have gone to live on the frontier and how they're surviving. And they realized they are not going to survive without community. They are not going to be successful unless and until they find a way to collaboratively and collectively work together to support each other. And so the Homestead Act was still an act of colonization, though I would say it was closer to a more organic, indigenous. In my mind, we should not be owning property. We should be collective stewards of the property and resources that are being presented to us. That's my personal philosophy. And I know a lot of people who are leaning more and more into that, because we are all realizing that this is the only planet we have right now. We aren't all rich enough to be able to fly to Mars or wherever Elon Musk wants to go. And so we owe it to ourselves and to all future generations to do whatever we can to be stewards of that environment. So how fascinating to watch these 3 families learn that it's not just about their own little piece of property. It's about how they interact with each other. So I am making the commitment to myself publicly to just try a little harder to go out into this community here in Erie, Pennsylvania, where I just happen to be living right now, and get to know people in my community, say hello to people in my community, go be of service to people in my community. Because I think for a while I've been very content to cocoon myself up in my tiny little bubble, in my tiny little hole over here for the last year or so. And it's time to come out. So, shall I end with a song? People always say people always say I should sing, and even my ancestors say, don't forget to sing. So in honor of the frontierness of it all, I'll sing an old folk song. From this valley, they say you are going. We will miss your bright eyes and sweet smile. For they say you are taking the sunshine that has brightened our pathway a while. Come and sit by my side if you love me. Do not hasten to bid me adieu, but remember the Red River Valley and the cowboy who loved you so true. All right, descendants of colonizers, we got work to do. Cheers. See you next time.